Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mary, as was introduced. I represent the Global ICT Research Team at Frost & Sullivan. Together with me today is Susan White, who is the Head of Strategy and Portfolio Marketing at NetHacker Technology. Today's discussion will be on growth opportunities in satellite direct-to-device and low Earth orbit communications. So during the discussion, we will be covering trends, opportunities, applications driving the next wave of development, how new approaches will impact existing and non-existing terrestrial and non-terrestrial services, and the outlook. So Susan, it's good to have you with me today.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
Yes, just before MWC.
Absolutely, in the final days.
So before we start the discussion, I have to say that even though this topic is near and dear to my heart, I have to admit that every time someone talks enthusiastically on the potential of for growth of this area, I laugh because it's as if it's a new concept again, over and over again. And the reason for this goes back to 1998 when I was enthusiastically working on my master's and touched on a comms payload for a small satellite in low Earth orbit. Of course, since then, a lot has happened in space, and just like a lot has happened in telecoms. And of late, the intersection between terrestrial and non-terrestrial services has become a hot topic. So of particular interest is how satellite direct-to-device and low Earth orbit comms have evolved to increase the likelihood of a successful integration. To set the context and perhaps clear any misconception for our discussion, I thought we would start with talking about what has changed and what hasn't changed. So Susan, please share with us your perspective on what's happening and why should people take interest, especially mobile operators.
Certainly will. So hello, everybody. Yes, it's great to be on this webinar, and what a fantastic topic. As Mei says, I mean, satellite's been around for a very long time, and all of a sudden, it's becoming a super hot topic in telecoms. And for those of you who'll be at Mobile World Congress next week, it'll be a hot topic there as well. So what I'd like to do is start by just discussing, some of the satellite services or satellite technologies that exist today before we talk about what's changing and why it's becoming such a big topic. So basically, there's three types of satellite technologies. I mean, there's many types actually, but there's three major types, so I won't go into every single one. But we have geostationary satellites that we call GEO. And GEO satellites are the ones that are 36,000 kilometers from the Earth. And the large satellites, you only need 2 or 3 of them to cover most of the planet. But because of the distance from Earth, the latency is very high, around about 600 milliseconds. So GEO services have never been ideal for real-time communications, but they've certainly played a major role and continue to play a major role in different types of communications where the latency isn't a big issue. But certainly many of us today are used to these types of services, for example, for broadcast TV services. Now, the other one is called mid-Earth orbit satellite, or MEO. And MEO, unlike GEO, which which orbits at the same time as Earth, MEO actually, does sort of take a few days to orbit, and it's positioned around 2,000 to 36,000 kilometers. So you start to get that latency coming down depending on where those satellites are. So MEO does play a very significant role, particularly for things like GPS and navigation systems. And then the third one is what we call LEO, and is one of the big topics of today. So low Earth orbit satellite. And LEO is basically positioned around 450 meters from Earth up to around 2,000 kilometers, or maximum of 2,000 kilometers. So you can see the huge difference. The fact that these satellites operate so close to the planet mean that the latency is incredibly, or can get incredibly low. In fact, it's very similar to fiber or 5G networks. And the fact that these satellites, you can group them together, the way it's architected, Unlike GEO, which you have a set capacity from that satellite, LEO satellites, you have many more of them, but you group them together. So the high capacity is achievable. From these satellites, and very low latency. So this makes a big difference. Now, the thing is, LEO is not new. It's been around for many, many, many years. What's changed, and the big change that we see is, first of all, advancements in the technology itself, obviously, that make things sort of more efficient, more affordable. But the big change is the launch technology. It was very, very expensive to launch these small satellites, so you need hundreds, if not thousands of them to cover the planet. And now you have launch rockets like SpaceX, and you have Blue Origin, and more I'm sure will appear in the future. Maybe not too many more because it's incredibly expensive. But the point is, you're able to put multiple of these satellites into these launch rockets, and it's, as a result, getting these constellations up and running has become much more affordable. And as a result, positioning these very high quality communication services for, particularly for remote locations, becomes much more affordable than, say, fiber and 5G. So now that's a big, a huge game changer. So that's a big change. Now, this is shaking up the industry because there's obviously a lot of new players coming into LEO that were never there before, like Starlink, for example, like Amazon Kuipers, which are coming, and many others. And you've also got companies who are in the geo space coming into LEO, either purchasing the new satellites or partnering with LEO companies. So it's shaking up the whole industry. And even in the GEO and MEO areas, we're finding that these satellites have been up for maybe 20, 30 years. They're ready to the new range of technologies like software-defined satellites. So these types of satellites are going up even in the GEO orbit. So we're finding there's a huge amount of change. And the final one I want to talk about is direct-to-device. Now, direct-to-device is basically where from your mobile phone, it will seamlessly connect to a satellite, just like it does for Wi-Fi. So, if your mobile is out of range, then this seamless connection to satellite can happen, and you just stay connected all the time. And it's not just for mobiles, it could be for IoT devices, which, so the combination of those in the APAC region will be very, very game changing. So this is emerging technology. We're finding, some companies are already launching some early test services today. But this is something that I think is going to make a big change in the industry, because basically what it does is it means satellite becomes not just a backup for telecom services on Earth, but it becomes potentially something that's more mainstream and is part of the sort of communication suite of many telco operators. And that's why it's incredibly important for every telco operator who essentially will be building some kind of strategy with the satellite operators.
Yeah, the part where you touched on the launch costs coming down, I remember that in 1998 there was a discussion on space junk already. So 30 years later, just imagine how complex it's going to get up there in space. So okay, we have established a baseline. Yeah. Okay. So let's move on to why network technology is in this space. Network technology is in this space. Please share with us how the company has the knowledge, capability, experience, and track record to make a difference in this space.
No, absolutely. Because maybe first, for those of you who don't know Netcracker, we're a company that's one of the sort of leading providers, if you like, of IT software for communication networks. We've been doing this for over 30 years, and we're actually a wholly owned subsidiary of the NEC group. Now, sort of what it basically means, we have all the business systems, the operational systems that allow you to efficiently run networks and monetize networks at the same time. We're involved in many of the digital transformation projects that are going on globally, a significant number here in the APAC region as well. So this is our big expertise. What many people may not know is that we're also have a huge experience in the satellite industry as well. In fact, we've been working with customers like Viasat on the geostationary, and we've been more recently working with Telesat on the new low Earth orbit LEO network constellation as well. We're providing the whole IT for that project too. So we have this tremendous amount of satellite expertise, and what we've basically done is brought those two sort of together, the experiences from both markets together, which have a number of great similarities, but they have a few differences too. But we've built the expertise together, and we've put together a satellite, let's say, IT blueprint for multi-orbit satellite as well. So it doesn't matter if it's LEO, GEO, or MEO. And we're working with telecom operators to help them advance their IT networks to work with satellite, and also helping the satellite operators put together this new advanced IT environment that they will need. So maybe just a few words why they need a new IT environment, because I think that's interesting too. Based on some of the changes we said earlier that are happening in this market, some of the requirements of the IT in the satellite industry are changing considerably. In the past, they offered services, satellite operators offered services that were fairly static, with sort of clearly defined partnerships that never really changed. Very simple pricing. So you didn't need much sophistication in the IT environment to offer these types of services, because nothing changed very often. Now everything's changing. If we think of LEO networks, I mean, the fact that these satellites are just orbiting around constantly every 90 minutes, connecting all the time with base stations as they traverse planet Earth. So you have hundreds and thousands of base stations, ground stations across the Earth that they connect to. And not only that, they're also connecting to planes and trains and ships that move all the time. So the incredible dynamicism that's happening in these networks means that you need something really sophisticated, very much built on AI technology that allows you to make sure that you can track these services, maintain services, maintain the quality that's needed, at any point in time. So this is a lot of change that's happening on the operations side, and on the business side, there's a couple of important things there. For example, satellite operators are global operators. They need to be able to operate in many countries. In fact, when a satellite sort of starts to move from one location to another, you need to make sure that there's customers around the world that are having your services, or else you'll have satellites that have no capacity for a certain amount of time, or let's say no customers using that capacity for a certain amount of time. That's a loss of business. So it's very important for satellite operators to set up sort of global business and have customers in many countries, but that's incredibly hard as well. So they need new sophisticated BSS systems, very similar to telcos. And also, just like telcos, satellite operators need a digital engagement model to be able to engage customers with, whether it's through web apps, through mobiles. But it's important to have everything where customers can make changes themselves, visualize their services. And this is happening in telco too. So all these changes need to happen in IT that never happened before. And this is why we're putting together this solution and blueprint that helps both the telco and the satellite operators take advantage and maximize the opportunities that they get from these different types of services.
Okay, so we've covered the context, the landscape, and how Netcracker can help. Maybe now let's touch on the new services that we can expect and which areas are expected to see greater growth and why.
Yes, absolutely. And there's many aspects to this. As we said earlier, that with the new satellite technologies, we're getting some key attributes of services that are very important for different markets. For example, we have the very high bandwidth to be able to offer high-speed internet services or backhaul services. We have low latency, which will be very important for some markets. The coverage, one thing I wanted to say about the coverage is with LEO especially, you get 100% coverage of planet Earth. So even if the poles where, you might have ships, you might have planes that get difficult connectivity in those environments, now you get that full coverage. So territories that were incredibly difficult to reach before, even with other satellite technologies, are possible. So these are some attributes, and of course the direct-to-device we spoke of earlier. So if we think of now the markets that will benefit from those different types of attributes and services, I think one of the biggest ones is the digital is bridging that digital divide. I mean, it's important for territories around the world, but in APAC especially, you have around 25–30% of people who don't get access to the internet in fixed or mobile. It's a huge gap to fill, and obviously in APAC the territories are very, can be very challenging. Like in Indonesia, you have thousands and thousands of islands, and other regions like Nepal might have very mountainous, so many people that live in mountainous regions. Or you have places that are prone to natural disasters, earthquakes and typhoons. And so getting connectivity to these places and maintaining it can actually be very challenging. And this is where LEO can play a very important role, and direct-to-device can play a very, very important role in bringing high-speed internet access, real-time voice and video calling to these places that are just not achievable or affordable with the other types of technologies. So, and even if we think of places like Australia, I mean, Australia has huge landmass, and 60% of the population still don't get access to mobile. So companies like TELUS and Optus Telstra and Optus are making big strides to work with LEO providers to extend that mobile connectivity to many people. We see that happening in the Philippines with Globe working as well with LEO partners to get mobile connectivity to very remote places. So a lot is happening there. But when we talk about digital divide, it's not just about the connectivity, it's also about enabling the sort of the digital types of services that are possible and progressing the digital economy of those nations. So for example, remote health, remote education, getting access to banking type services. All these things are very, very difficult for people in hard to reach areas or underserved areas. And this also, LEO services will make a big difference there. So that's one group. The second group will be those related to vertical industries that will have a huge benefit from satellite technology in terms of the low latency services, particularly, and the connectivity of IoT. So one good example is agriculture. It's a sort of huge. Some countries in APAC, obviously, that's a huge agriculture business is incredibly important, and making that more efficient and providing that food safety is extremely important. So again, leveraging LEO technology for those kinds of services, being able to connect different IoT devices, being able to manage the condition of the soil, look at the condition of the crops, being able to track livestock, all of these things when these farms are in extremely remote locations will make a massive difference to these types of industries. Another one would be also in maritime and fishing. Again, a huge industry in the APAC region, where it's very, very difficult in the ocean because you can't get the connectivity that you need. So being able to track ships and vessels at any point in time is something very important, and this is something Singtel, for example, is working on with Starlink to be able to bring these services to maritime. So these types of industries are very important. Then we have things like government services, of course, have been using this technology for a long time, but disaster recovery will benefit enormously. We have many regions that suffer from earthquakes like Japan, and being able to recover the communications immediately, being able to get mobile communications to the people doing the relief efforts without having to have special phones, which is something they have to have today. But if we can do that from ordinary phones, will make a massive difference, will speed things up, will make the communications much easier. And also being able to do like very precise imagery of the situation on the Earth as well, that will help relief efforts too. So that's another important area. And then one final one I wanted to talk about was it's not just about remote places. I mean, obviously satellite is great to get to places that are hard to get to with fiber and 5G. However, it's also important in urban areas, because in urban areas you want to make sure that, for example, if there's a sudden surge in capacity, that you don't want to put too many fibers and too much infrastructure in the ground. You want to be able to do that offload on satellite. Could be an awful lot more affordable, and also support sort of backup services and have more redundancy and resiliency built in to the solutions. So that's important as well. And even in finance, I mean, finance industry is incredibly interested in LEO services because of the latency. Because actually, if you make financial transactions over a long distance, crossing borders, then the latency from LEO can actually be less than traversing different fiber hops that might go either under the sea or across the land. So the finance community are really interested in how they can do sort of instant transactions and kind of manage their stock transactions instantly with these new types of services that are just not feasible, or they are feasible, but they're actually more efficient with these services. So I think there's a whole, whether it's backhaul, and one thing actually I didn't mention earlier, I just wanted to mention, is when we talk about getting sort of LEO or satellite services to remote places, it's not just about direct satellite connectivity. It also helps you put in 5G base stations in very remote places. So you can extend that mobile connectivity, because you can backhaul on satellite, and backhaul for really, any type of service, low latency, high bandwidth. So, that as well is, plays a major role. So huge amount of opportunities that are possible with this technology, now that it's become, let's say, more affordable to be more mainstream comms.
So Susan, you've established that there's demand, and you've established that it might differ country to country. I just wanted to get your take a little bit more on whether you see more of the impact on developing countries or developed countries.
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. I think it's difficult to generalize, because every country has its own, let's say, goals and an agenda, and also very different terrains and environments. So it's difficult to say that developing is this and developed countries do that. I think both of them, first of all, I think all nations can benefit greatly in many of the ways I just said, depending on what their core industries are and core goals are, can benefit from satellite. I think we can think of, for example, some nations, the digital divide being incredibly important, because so big proportion of their populations are in difficult to reach areas, and they really want to focus on that, especially if the government's behind that and paying some of the incentives that are needed and that to make that happen. However, we see even in Australia, where there's vast amounts of people that are not yet connected. So again, it's not sort of a one or another. But and even as I said earlier about disaster recovery, places like Japan, needing to have these services because of the what basically what happens in terms of the different earthquakes they experience, or tsunamis. It's really important. So I think that's difficult to generalize too much, but I think that the reality is that everyone will essentially have the opportunity, depending on what their particular country goal is and how much they're willing to invest in towards that goal.
Yeah, I think one thing is certain is that maybe the timelines for how things will evolve in each country will differ. So with this new technology comes new ways of doing things and new business models. How do you see it playing out in the satellite space to enable these new services, new service innovations in consumer, enterprise, and government agencies?
Yes, exactly. I think we've talked a lot about what the different new satellite technologies are. We've talked about the services that are possible. I think what's important to touch on is who provides those and what the partnerships are. So I want to talk a little bit about the partnership model, because maybe it sounds like satellite's going to come in and take away the business of 5G and fiber, and take away the business of telcos even. But in our view, that's unrealistic. The model that's being developed is very much a partnership model. And that's because the satellite services are incredibly specialist, obviously. It's very specialized technology, and there's only a certain amount of companies that are obviously going to operate in space. As you said earlier, we don't want too many satellites because eventually they run out of steam and they have to be taken down. So the satellite area is very, very specialist. Telco area is very specialist as well, and the knowledge that you have on the ground and the telco networks themselves. So what's key is that these two groups, if you like, will need each other to thrive. Satellite operators, a lot of them don't want to work directly with the end customers anyway. That's not their business model. For example, one of our customers, Telesat, who is really setting themselves up for premium high quality services, their prime markets are going to be, sort of big multinational corporations as well as telco partnerships for wholesale. So they're not looking to have an end relationship with a consumer or a small business. They're looking to do that through a wholesale relationship with telcos. Then you've got others like Starlink and Amazon Kuipers who are doing a retail model. They do want to reach out to enterprises and consumers. However, they're doing that when there's no fiber and 5G alternatives. It's like another option if those services aren't available, because the reality is fiber and 5G will always be economically cheaper to serve in normal areas. So satellite, whilst we say it's affordable, it's still clearly more expensive to run mass market services. So there's got to be a cooperation. There's got to be a sharing. We have a number of new satellite players coming into the market. For example, AST Space Mobile, Link, who are very much setting themselves up, as well as Skylo, actually, they're very much setting themselves up to offer, let's say, 5G services from space. So this is really targeting the mobile to connectivity to satellite when 5G or 4G isn't available. So you've got all these new companies setting up, but their business model is through telcos. They're not looking to operate directly to any customer. They're looking to have partnerships with the different telcos across there. So I think it's very important that these partnerships are set up. Partnerships not just for LEO, but for GEO and MEO, because different types of satellite services will suit different environments at different price points. So it's not always LEO that will be the best option. So I think every telco now should be thinking about how they adopt those different partnerships, and same for the satellite operators. So I think that's a critical thing. And the other thing I wanted to touch on that you mentioned, Meili, is the business models, because all this sounds great, but obviously it has to cost in for the different players. And this is where I think we'll see some very different business models appear. Like, for example, for direct to device, the telcos are still looking at how to charge for that. So will it be something that just gets added to your subscription as an extra charge per month and gives you the, let's say, ability to do ubiquitous communications? Or will it be priced per session that you roam onto satellites? Or will it be offered for free for a premium service? So if you buy our top end service, you bundle in satellite for free. So there's lots of different business models, and I think that's what's happening now. Is the operators and the satellite operators are sort of figuring out what works best. And obviously it's early days for this technology, so that will take time. For enterprises, I think there'll be a lot of requirements for sort of buying satellite services on a pay-as-you-grow and pay-as-you-need basis, because the enterprise companies don't want to invest in, you know, massive capacity, massive infrastructure and have that locked in. They want to be able to use it as they need it. So pay-as-you-grow strategies will be important for them. Also, things like IoT as a service. We can see business models for that coming in too, where, you know, you're basically, you know, whether it's a sensor or a device, you're sort of paying for that as a service, depending on the particular need it has, whether it's a stationary one, whether it's a roaming one like a drone. So all these types of new business models. Obviously on the government side, there's going to be a lot of opportunities there to fund bridging that digital divide and having the money available to do that. But also there can also be a lower cost of being able to protect borders and protect security in different types of ways with this satellite connectivity. So we can see different business models there. So I think there'll be a lot of new things we see, and all of these things, whether it's on the partnership side, on the business model side, all of this will also be driven into the IT that we spoke of earlier, because you need that flexibility as the operators adjust and understand, you know, how the business, you know, what kind of business they want to operate. We have to be flexible to allow them to offer all these types of options.
Yeah, I see a question come in. I think we're gonna have some time for questions at the end. So maybe let's move to the next part of the discussion, which is on AI. So of late, there's been a lot of talk on how AI is now a critical element of technology solutions. So within our context, how important, Susan, is AI in capturing new opportunities?
Yes, absolutely. So we cannot have a conversation these days without talking about AI. So that's absolutely critical, and it's critical. I mean, that's all I can say. It's critical. It is absolutely essential in many different areas, and I can give plenty of examples. For example, on the operations side, where we want to be able to the satellite operators want to be able to offer the best quality service at any time and guarantee SLAs. And how do you guarantee those SLAs when the satellites are moving and the ground state, you know, the things they're connecting to are moving, and everything's changing constantly? And it becomes very difficult. And also the service parameters, like the latency at the poles will be higher than the latency near the equator. So even the typical service level objectives that you build into a service level agreement are going to be constantly changing depending on where you are on the planet. So all these things become very hard to manage, and the only way to really manage them is with AI. And that needs to be embedded in the solution to be able to predict when you know, when things are going to happen, when movements happen. So that the prediction piece is incredibly important to constantly build a service topology of the network and manage all these changes. It's incredibly important for the assurance side too, to be able to detect any sort of strange things and anomalies that are happening in the network, be able to predict capacity and things like that. And it's also important, you know, apart from the operations side, it's also important to map. For example, if you're trying to get new customers onto your network and you already have many customers with agreed SLAs, how do you make sure the new customers are not going to impact the existing ones? So there's also using AI technology to manage what we call SLA capacity management as well. So we build it into many parts of the solution, and then we can think of AI at the front end. I mean, we've been talking about generative AI, Gen AI for a few years now. And we're starting to see this materialize in the telco networks. It'll be used extensively in satellite networks as well. So whether it's for the interaction piece, being able to interact with the customers and the partners in the upfront selling, in the ability to solve problems. I mean, we're, for example, on a wholesale partnership where we're using it, Gen AI already, to be able to respond to very complex questions that come from invoices from wholesale partners that have many, many customers attached to them. So we're already using that technology today commercially, and the time it takes to respond to these queries goes from days to kind of minutes. And these things are incredibly important as well. And then it's used internally within the business, for example, to assess the profitability, of a contract. When satellite operators and telcos and other partners work together, they've got to make sure that whatever kind of service they're setting up, they're actually going to make money from it, and it makes sense. And yet these networks are super complex. By leveraging AI as part of that process, we're able to make sure that the deals done can actually make people money. So yeah, AI, every single piece, front-end engagement, internally within the business, throughout the operations environment. If we didn't have AI, we wouldn't be able to do the sophistication that's happening in these networks today.
Not just the sophistication, I think also keeping the costs within the sort of like bandwidth that can help operators profit from the service.
Absolutely, because it's essentially a big piece of AI is helping you to be able to do more automation. It advances the automation advances the ability to save costs, and all that drives the fact that you can not just offer the most advanced services, but you can do it the most economical way possible, so that you can actually make a profit from it. So absolutely, yeah.
Yep. Okay, so I think we're going to start to wrap up now. So what are some of the drivers for greater industry collaboration? And what are the implications for both telcos, more satellite providers, and perhaps even a broader ecosystem?
Yes, I think one of the important things is, we've said collaboration is so important, working together is so important, but there's a few things need to be in place for that to happen. And one of the things I wanted to mention is the importance of relationships being adopted through a sort of automated APIs. It's happening in telco. It's starting to happen. It's perhaps gaining momentum now, and the satellite operators are going in the same direction. And for this, it's incredibly important to work with standards like TM4, Remote APIs, MEF APIs. They're all doing big efforts to make sure that the operators can work with many partners, and they're not redefining these APIs all the time, because this is what takes months, even years to get everything ready. And we want to be able to do these things much faster, especially when the constellations are all up and running. You want to be able to onboard partners fast. You want them to be able to order services and provision services automatically through these APIs. You want them to be able to visualize their services, see what the SLAs are, see what objectives have not been met. And all these interactions should be happening seamlessly. So whether it's from us as a technology vendor through to the service partners, I think this ability to support API engagement models is going to be incredibly important to speed things up. So I think that's an important point. The other thing related to collaboration, and we haven't touched upon, is spectrum. Now, in the mobile, in telco networks and the mobile networks, we have all this spectrum that's allocated for different services, 4G, 5G, and then we have all the spectrum that's allocated for satellite services, some of which overlaps, not too much, but there is absolutely some overlap between these spectrums. But what's interesting is how that gets utilized. You've got some satellite companies today that are working with telcos and using their spectrum to offer services from space, and that needs approval from the regulators of the country they're operating in. So that's very important. And then others are sort of driving towards standards like 3GPP, which manages all the standards for the mobile networks. The 3GPP standards are being extended for non-terrestrial networks as well. And that allows you to use spectrum, different spectrum, space spectrum, if you like. So there's many different moving parts. So the spectrum, let's say agreements and regulations, as well as the standards like 3GPP, etc., they all need to come together, quite fast, if you like, because you've got some very big companies involved in this, like Starlink and Amazon Kuipers, and these not the type of companies that wait years for standards to be done. So I'd imagine the industry needs to move very quick so that we can all work together towards a common set of standards, and that helps the whole ecosystem work much better. And then maybe the last point is just on the business case. I think, as I said earlier, I think to make this work, the obviously satellite investments are enormous. I mean, telco investments are enormous with 5G and fiber and everything else that's needed. Satellite investments are enormous because you're talking about launching rockets and space into space. So you've got to make the business case work for everybody. Everybody's got to have their piece to make this viable. So it's potentially a viable business, but I think there needs to be a lot of collaboration to make sure that it is viable on all sides.
Okay, so I think we've established that the topics on satellite direct-to-device and low Earth orbit communications are both topics that are or have reached a turning point. As my last question, I would want to give the audience a sense of how fast they need to adapt to this shift. What do you expect will happen within the next 3 to 5 years?
Yes, well, I think it's like everything. I think there's two things that are happening very quickly in our market right now. One is AI, and the other is satellite. And I think these two areas are progressing at an incredibly rapid pace. And the reality is today, I mean, LEO networks obviously are established with companies like Starlink and Eutelsat. And they have very, very large constellations of LEO networks today. And as I said, there's many players in LEO and GEO. But there's so many new companies just about to enter the market. And these companies were working, on the solutions today, testing solutions. But the actual satellite constellations won't go up until maybe next year, possibly even 27. And we're talking about Amazon Kuipers, talking about Telesat. We're talking about AST Space Mobile, which has a few today, but not that many, and Link, and all these companies, sort of building up the networks, if you like. So we're still at the early stages of satellite, but what we're seeing is the rapid pace. And it's not going to be a case where you wait till these constellations go up and then you work out what to do. The telco operators today are already formulating their strategy. Many of them, as I spoke earlier, are already sort of bringing LEO and GEO services into their communication portfolio today. And that needs to get, extend and extend. So the work needs to happen now to basically figure out what those strategies are, because this industry is moving very fast, and what the business models will be as well, how to make it viable as well. So I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done very quickly, even though we'll see a few years before some of these services become more mainstream.
Okay, so we have one question. So the question that's being asked of you is, while the potential in areas or situations in which there are no or very poor connectivity is clear and massive, I appreciate your view on the expected LEO integration with existing terrestrial networks market, either as directly interacting with your customer or as backhaul provider for telcos. In this context, I appreciate if you could address the capacity and spectrum limitations to support these activities and beyond serving poor connectivity zones.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, this is a good question, because we often look at satellite just for those places that are hard to get to. But there'll be a lot of places where you want to integrate satellite services, especially LEO, where you do have existing connectivity. So there's two things here. I think if it relates to backhaul, then that's a little bit simpler. I'd say simpler, but it's simpler in that you're not dealing with the spectrum issues anymore because it's really connectivity. So you're basically backhauling 5G base stations, which could be in urban areas for handling boost of capacity that may be needed, or handling if you had some kind of cybersecurity attack and you needed to put communications up through LEO. So this will require absolute integration with the 5G network. A lot of things need to happen there. This is where the APIs can come in very much, to have interworking APIs at the IT layer, at the network layer, to be able to work across these two environments, if you like. And one of the things we've built in Netcracker is some service models that sort of transverse from space to Earth, if you like. So it's like a multi-domain models that are needed to be able to do these kinds of things. And then if LEO integration is happening directly with customers in terms of this handover, this seamless connectivity of mobile to satellite services, then yes, you have a lot of spectrum to sort out, whether it's using the mobile spectrum on the Earth, which needs regulatory approval, or whether you're using space spectrum, and then you're sort of driving into sort of more standards domains like 3GPP. So absolutely, this is also a major use case area as well.
Okay, so we have one other question that has come in. So it's from the financial industry, asking how can we better utilize AI to enhance our research and investment activities?
How can we use AI? So not satellite. Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit hard to answer that question, because I don't know what the in the finance industry, I mean, specific to AI, there'll be an enormous amount of uses beyond. I mean, our specialization.
Okay, I think Susan, maybe let's frame it this way. This is a discussion on satellite direct-to-device or low Earth orbit communications. You did mention financial industry in as one of the verticals, and maybe from that context, how can AI support them?
Yeah, so I mean, finance is for sure is a major market that satellites can help with in different ways. Obviously, in remote communities, it could be more bringing financial services to underserved areas, or in urban areas, it can be, like I say, doing financial transactions using satellite technology because the delay is lower. Now, the AI piece will kind of be enabling those services to be set up. It'll be, whether from provisioning those services, or all the way through to managing the SLAs of those services and maintaining the latency that's needed for those transactions. So AI will play a huge role in maintaining the kinds of services that will be needed for these financial institutions, if it relates to being able to manage very, very rapid instant transactions that are happening over quite large distances.
We have one more question coming. Is asking more about a wireless backhaul. So if I understand it correctly, he's asking about the expectation, sorry, screen went up. The expectation of the LEO market share in respect to backhaul, or use for backhaul. Or maybe let me frame it slightly differently. If we are saying this satellite piece is going to complement the terrestrial piece, right? How will it impact the backhaul services. Do you see the backhaul services growing tremendously? Is the potential going to be big in this space?
Yeah, so basically, first of all, just to be clear, when we're talking about LEO, I wouldn't see it competing. Again, I don't see it competing with fiber and 5G, where these solutions are available and can be, you know, like for backhaul, like fiber solutions or microwave solutions, if they're available, will more likely to be utilized. We're talking about LEO for backhaul in areas where you can't get fiber. So I think we're talking about new areas that are going to be served, not existing areas. And as we said earlier, there's a huge number of customers in APAC that don't have mobile connectivity, they don't have mobile internet connectivity. And that's where we can position, for example, 5G base stations or 4G, and we can backhaul on satellite, because you just can't get fiber to these places. So I don't really want to see it as competing with fiber, because where fiber is feasible, it makes sense. You put that under the ground, it's there. You can turn on different capacities when you need it. It's not really competing in that same market. And also, I would, you know, the LEO in terms of capacity inferiority, yes, compared to fiber for sure. But the thing is with LEO, you obviously, depending on how many, how you group your constellations, you can add more and more to increase the bandwidth. So LEO has the potential to deliver very, very high gigaspeed bandwidths for sure. But no, I wouldn't see it competing with the fiber backhaul.
Okay, I have a few comments on that, so maybe let me add up to your answer if possible. I think my first observation is that satellite gives a global perspective. So backhaul services on a global level would bring things into a slightly different era, if I may. And if you're gonna touch on competing, I think maybe there are areas that there are no coverage, and that's low-hanging fruits that competition from your perspective may not be there today. But I think it will also play a critical role in areas where there is coverage. It's kind of a check and balance. If I may draw from the telecoms industry, there's the mobile operator and then there's the MVNO. And in some markets, there may be many MVNOs. So there's still a potential to play in an existing market with coverage. So it depends on the business model.
Absolutely. No, I agree with that. Yeah.
Thank you very much for listening to our webinar today. We hope to continue the conversations with you and discuss more great things in future. Thank you very much.